I took a look at the questions I was going to have, and they're kind of been represented throughout this process. Representative Trehane mentioned something that I think I wanted to talk about a little bit more, though, and that is after action reports, getting ready for after action reports, getting ready to identify what we did wrong throughout this process and what can be done better in the future. And how have you, the different groups, been identifying clearly through your process that you've kept appropriate data so that we know and can observe what we need into the future, and how the working relationships have worked throughout this process and how they can be improved? And I asked that question to each and every one of the panelists.
I can start. At J&J, this has been really an unprecedented experience for us, scaling up the production of this vaccine. So we've learned many steps along the way about how to quickly scale up manufacturing in parallel with running our clinical trials. I would say one thing that we've learned is really the unprecedented unselfishness of the American population. So people coming forward to volunteer for participation in our trials has been really outstanding and beyond what we could have wished for. And we want to thank all the volunteers that did that.
Before we go to the next panelist, I appreciate what was just said. I want to get into specifically what you need to do, or we need to do, to work with you into the future, the next 10, 20, 30 years, so that this doesn't happen again, so that we're out in front on research, identifying clearly the path ahead of us to prevent deaths in the future.
Yeah, I can follow on.
Next, please.
One of the things that has helped us move forward as quickly as possible is the development and investment in the platform that we're using to bring forward this vaccine, that we've been using to develop other vaccines for Ebola, HIV, and RSV. So that's one lesson that we've learned, is that's tremendously helpful, so that in the event that you experience a pandemic, you can leverage platforms like that and transition to whatever infectious disease you're facing during a pandemic.
Thank you. I know time's fast here in 5 minutes. I'd still want to hear from you what, not specifically the recent panelists, but from anybody, what are you doing now so that we can learn from this? Not what we've done, what we are going to do in the future to work together so that this doesn't happen again to the American public and the people of the world.
Thank you for the question. I mean, it's a great question. We believe there are many lessons learned. I think probably all of our companies have experienced extremely productive and timely interactions with regulators. And I think that's something that we should carry forward, to any future pandemic, but I think we should carry forward for other important medicines and treatments that our companies are developing. Specifically as it relates to a pandemic, I also think that this has shown around the world that we don't have adequate capability to really conduct viral surveillance and genomic screening to make sure that we can identify variants of concern. And that's something that I think would certainly be a real enhancement to the benefit of public health in the United States.
And as time is running out, I just want to thank, let's go quickly. Go ahead.
Oh, so sorry, sir. The only thing I'd add, I agree with everything that's been said there. I think the other thing that was important in all of our cases was the investments in science. Somebody's already mentioned platforms. That was important in the private sector, but actually in science, in the NIH and NIAID, to identify prefusion stabilized spike proteins on coronavirus as a key way to make vaccine. In fact, that's something we all have in common. And so those sorts of investments against new potential emerging pathogens are absolutely essential.
And I'll apologize to the chair for the overtime, but this is an area that I think in the future we strongly need to look into on a continuing basis. And I thank you.
I agree.